Okay, alright everyone. So, welcome, and this will be a short uh, few parts video about the fundamentals of 3ds Max. We are going from the very basics, and we'll touch the practical topics, all of those needed to understand the logic of 3ds Max and how to use it effectively. It is not a simple software, but it's true for any 3D application, but it has its strengths quite a lot. So I will go through all the basics and make sure that you can work effectively as soon as possible. Okay, so let's start. Now, when you open it up, you will have a similar layout. This was 3ds Max 2018, but you have a similar layout since then, so even if the 21 has some kind of a similarity. Now, this is a dark scene, and I don't really prefer this dark scene because the icons changed a lot and they are not as informative as were previously. So 2015 is, I think, still the best UI that 3ds Max had for learning purposes and screening and sharing information. So if you have a chance, you can learn on that. If not, everything will work fine. It's just a little bit harder on the eye and hard to learn and recognize and getting familiar with the icons, because everything looks the same. So it's neat from the design standpoint, but it's pretty much not the best for learning purposes. Okay, so what you see here, we have 4 viewports right at the beginning. Some of you might find it confusing, but actually it's not that daunting. Actually, we will work most in the perspective viewport, but before we are getting there, let me walk through the user interface. So we have a toolbar here at the up, and the main icons used for transforming, selection, and other snaps and different floaters are available here. But be careful if you have a laptop or your screen is relatively small, or you just downsized the 3ds Max, you may find it's falling off, a couple icons falling off. To resolve this problem, you just have to go in and look for the palm. So when the cursor switches to a palm, you can drag that area. It's true for everything. So if you have a suspicion that, hey, there should be something more, don't be afraid. Just hover over and look for an area that's empty, and when it's changed to a palm, you can drag it out and move it away. Another item that can be a little bit confusing at first for 3ds Max users is that you have kind of a radio options for various buttons. Let me switch to probably the selection here. So left mouse clicking, holding the left mouse, and after a couple seconds it will open up and show all the variations of that particular tool. Okay, so this is the simple selection, a type of selection. So right now it's a rectangular marquee, so if you just drag it out, it will draw a rectangle no matter what viewport you're using it. If we are switching it to a quite obvious circular rectangle selection, it will select the circle element. It's good for selecting parts of a cylinder, for example, on the top viewport. So here, dragging from the center, so it's quite good. And we have kind of a lasso type of selection. We can paint selection and freeform draw selection. So this was freeform and this was paint selection. This is great if you have an organic surface and you want to select things fast. Okay, and here we go. Now, kind of a weird thing, but let me clarify this first. So 3ds Max uses a lot of hotkeys, and if you accidentally press something and you don't know what's happened, usually it causes a headache. So most of the beginners may struggle with these phenomena, that you pressed accidentally something and you don't know what happened. It's true for every 3D application, but in 3ds Max there are a couple of dangerous things. So first of all, because we were just talking about these drop down buttons, if you press Shift F oh, sorry, Control F, that's save frame. Control F is a kind of a cycle button. Okay, so Control F cycles through these options. And when you are pressing the Control F hotkey, it will indicate what the change did. So here we are, now we are in spray paint selection. So if I'm pressing again Control F, it will revert back to the original rectangular selection. So Control F is switching this one. The other thing that's typically happening, and let me show this in a perspective viewport. So I'm in a perspective viewport. I've clicked in because I wanted to activate the viewport. Activation color is this kind of a yellowish ribbon here. And because I want to create, I'm looking for my sidebar and looking for this plus sign as adding on something. And this is a geometry type of addition. And right now I'm looking for standard primitives. It means I have a limited chance to edit them, but I can change the sizes and other things. So it's a primitive, it's kind of a basic geometrical object. And I will select a teapot. Right now it's not created yet, but it is active. So I'm ready to create a teapot. And the left mouse button is dragged, so I'm pressing down close to the origin, holding down my left mouse button, and I'm dragging away the mouse. And by the way, when I'm dragging, I will adjust the size on the go. If I'm not sure about the size, I can check on my screens. So a few values will change up here or on the right side, but right now it's not visible there. So when I'm satisfied, I'm letting off the left mouse button, and now I have it created. So if I want to create another one, I can just tap on an empty area, drag it out and release, and here we go, I have the second one, and maybe the third one. If I don't want to create any more teapots, and this is crucial in 3ds Max, you have to exit the command. But the way you exit is press a right click in the viewport. Now let me show a couple scenarios, and these scenarios can help you out when you have struggles with that. So if you're going in and clicking here on teapot, it will just entering you in the teapot creation method. So it's not leaving the task. So you have to press a right click. But if you're not pressing here the right click, so in the active viewport, this is what happens. So teapot is active. I'm here in this viewport and I'm pressing a right click here on this viewport. This is what happens. Instead of exiting from the teapot command, I've activated the other viewport. And I can do it all over again until I'm clicking again a right click. Because now this is the active window and I press the right click. So right click is also kind of a universal button. So you have a kind of an activate things, especially in the regarding to viewports. But this is, at the end of the day, you will see that you're pressing right click multiple times. So if there will be a situation when you have a selection and teapot is selected and you don't want to create any more, and but you want to instead move the selection you have, and you may find it a little bit odd that you're going up, for example, in the front view, pressing right click. First right click activated the window, second right click deactivated the teapot creation, and the third right click will bring you up this quad palette. Right now it's not quad part, it's just two, but usually you will see the quad version of it. So, and then you can switch to move. Alright, so right click is usually your solution for bringing up basic commands, exiting from a pending operation, or clicking and activate a window, for example, or something similar. Okay, now Control F was the first hotkey that I was talking about, and the usage of the right mouse button. But there's something else I want to address, is lock selection. So that's another typical trap in 3ds Max if you're coming from a different software, especially Photoshop. So if you're switching from 2D editing to 3D, and you're just sitting in front of a computer and just pressing spacebar locks your selection, okay? So that's something typical in 3ds Max. That means you are not able to select anything else except your selection. If you're you can't press your lock selection if you have nothing selected. Okay, so don't get confused. But if you have a selection, you can press spacebar and here we go, locked. Alright, so if you see that you're not able to select anything else, check for this icon. Okay, now we are still before any kind of a viewport action. So let me explain what's going on here and how to rotate things around and how to use the left mouse button. Left mouse button is mostly for adjustments and all the jobs, and the main function is selection and manipulating things and moving around things. So if you have something, you can point on and select. This is one way. You can also drag a selection, and if you're just touching the item, it will be selected. You can select multiple items by dragging the windows, touching both, or by selecting the one, holding down Control and click on others to add to the selection. To remove from your selection, subtract from the selection, you can hold on Alt key and clicking on the item you want to remove from the selection. If you have this Scene Explorer open, you can also look for the name and select by name. So that is about the selection. One thing that may happen is here's the selection mode, and that is it has two stages. So one is for window crossing. That means if you just touch the model, it will be selected. And the other one is you have to cover the model entirely. So drag it out, and now we have a full selection. But if we are just touching the model, it won't be selected. Oh, well, accidentally moved. Yes, we have Ctrl Z, Ctrl Z to undo, and Ctrl Y is the redo. Okay, so you can use this redo and undo options. Ctrl Y is redo, and Ctrl Z is undo. Okay, now let me switch to the normal selection mode. We are not there yet to transform the models. So, but this is the basics for selecting an item. Another thing that you might want to take care of is when you have a pending selection and you're clicking away in another window with your left mouse button, it will deactivate your selection. It will activate the window, however, it will deactivate your selection. So what you can do is make a habit of selecting with right click, as you've seen before, or what I do like is the middle mouse click. And here comes something we have to talk about. So we are using a 4-button mouse. I know it sounds very beginner, but believe me, sometimes if you've never used 3D before, many people don't recognize that the middle mouse, the scroll wheel, is not just for scrolling, but it can click. So that is the 4th button. The real deal comes when you experience that your mouse is a little bit sticky and this middle mouse click is not that easy. So it's not really a big problem if you have a couple of clicks, but if you have hundreds of middle clicks, you might want to look for a proper mouse. Usually that's a kind of a gaming mouse. Sometimes gaming mouses and professional mouses has a function to tilt the scroll wheel. That means you have just the scroll wheel plus 3 buttons. So that means pressing straightforward down is one button, tilting left is another one, tilting right is another one. Now in that case, in my experience, some of these are not fine-tuned for a simple press down. Sometimes that's too hard on your finger. So I like to program those to kind of a tilt. So in my case, I'm using my middle finger and tilting the scroll wheel to the left. It's up to you. If you have some kind of a similar mouse, you might want to try it. It's just a technical tip to save your joints. Okay, So when you have a selection, it's a good thing to use the middle mouse click or right click to activate a separated window, and that way you will not lose the selection. Of course, you can use the spacebar to lock your selection, and this way you don't have to worry about clicking with the left mouse. Okay, now let's go to the navigation, and so this is what I'm talking about, navigation here, because that is the middle mouse button, that is the scroll wheel. So if you are just scrolling, that will be a zoom in and out. Now, as you see, it's an incremental zoom, so it's not a kind of an analog continuous zoom. It is a step zoom, but it's working fine. What you have to take a look and keep it in mind that we have a function called zoom about mouse point, and zoom about mouse point is kind of a focus zoom. So it's really a valuable thing, and at first it might be odd, but later on you will recognize this and get used to this. You will use it all the time, and probably you will miss it from other software. Okay, so when I'm scrolling out and my cursor is in the middle, I can zoom out, no problem, and everything remains at the center. But this is what I can do. If I'm hovering over here, or probably the lid or just the end, I can zoom to that particular point, because this is where my focus is. Zoom about mouse point. Where's the mouse point? On the lid. So the zoom will drive me to the lid. Okay, it's really good. It's not the easiest, but it's really good once you get used to this. This is the moment when someone gets lost. So if you don't see your models, you don't see your content, probably you're out of the range. This is what I like the best. When you press the button Z, it will land you on your selection. If you don't have anything in your selection and you press Z, it will just focus everything that you have on the scene. Alright, it's very handy, and it's quite comfortable to use 3ds Max with the left hand on the keyboard, and we will use mostly this Q, W, E, R, T, Y line, and also the numbers, the 1, 2, 3, and the function key F1, F2, F3. Be careful. So Mac users, if you're switching to PC, or if you have never used the function keys are the top line on a Windows keyboard, and this is not F letter plus numeric 1, this is F1, F2, function 3. Okay, so that's it. Now here we go. So that's about the zoom. Now how to pan the scene. You have to hold down the scroll wheel, so use the 4th button. So I'm pressing down my scroll wheel, and now I'm ready to pan. And I'm going to also scroll and pan, so it's really fast, really easy. And how to rotate, I'm holding down the Alt key, and voila, still using the mouse wheel button, so still using the 4th button, and I can rotate it around. And if I'm releasing the Alt, I can just scroll, pan, pressing Alt, releasing, pressing, so I don't even have to worry about this. It's really interactive. So whenever you are pressing the Alt key, it will switch to rotation mode if you are holding down the scroll. Okay, it's a very intuitive way to rotate around things. Now we have this viewport cube, which one was designed to help newcomers to 3ds Max. Actually, I really don't like it. It's because right away when you open up 3ds Max and you see this, many people think that okay, it's good if I'm using this one, but it is just damn slow. So if you are using this, and it's not just so slow, but it's also misleading, because it is not a front view. A front view is an orthographic view. It is not a front view, it is a view from the front point. It is still a perspectival camera view. Okay, and when you try to teach and try to learn the software, and someone says, hey, switch to a front view, and you're not switching to an orthographic front view, it could be it could be, come on, it could be, I don't say it's a disaster, but you may lose long minutes of work and you have to start over on a class or anything else, anywhere else. So when we are using front view is orthographic. These are just straight isometric views, simple planar projections. Okay, there's no camera effect, there's no distance shrinking and anything. It's just a front view. So please don't use these. You can rotate around with this one, but come on, you are losing all the functions of zooming to particle elements, and if you press Z it will center everything anyways. So it's pretty much a kind of a misleading idea. It's very good if you have no tuition, it's very good if you're just really jump starting, but keep using it might cause troubles. Okay, so stay away from it if it's possible. Now we have a couple options more regarding the viewports. So take a look at those. What you see here in the top, it's these are not just texts, so it's not just an information bar here. These are actually buttons. So if I'm in a perspective viewport, let me maximize this viewport. Okay, so let me go full screen on the viewport. Here's this maximize viewport toggle. It's the bottom on the right side. There's a hotkey assigned to this function. This is Alt W. Alt W will toggle this window, big screen, small screen. It's very good. So it's a very smooth way to use it. You don't have to use silly numpad codes or whatever. It's just Alt W and you boom, here you are. And if you get lost, you don't know where your things are or which one is in front of the other, etc. You're just going back and check these. All right. Now, so here we are, and let me look for the basic settings. So if I'm pressing the plus sign, here's this active viewport, and I can switch between the viewports. So I can press go to the front view. And now I have a front view. I'm still on a full size, but I'm on a front view. If I want to go back to perspective, I can do it here. But it's there, it's available as a button. It's pretty good, but honestly, I don't care about this. What else? Again, I was talking about a very introductory class. I was talking about you will find that Previous Max offering the same adjustments from at different points. Okay, it is because it's a big and old software. So I don't think it's good or bad or whatever. You can use it many ways, and I think it's a treasure. So you can do the same thing here. If you're going in perspective and switch to top, here we go. Here we are in the top viewport. Now, what changed here is it's top here. We can have multiple versions of this top. Now, what's going on? So let me switch back to perspective, and now my perspective changed, and I see now the shading. So what's happened here? It's switched to wireframe. So I can click on here because it's a button and say, okay, default shading might do the job for me. So the easiest way to change, instead of going in here and look active and select, you can go here. It's still pretty slow. What you can do is T for top viewport, L for left viewport, F for front viewport, and P is back for perspective. Okay, so that's the fastest way. So, and it's fairly easy to memorize. So if you don't want to switch back all the time for the 4 viewports, now I messed up the many things. So I can switch this to top again. It's front, it's left, and here we go, perspective. So it works in the 4 viewports as well. And if I'm maximizing again, I can switch it back to desired projection. Okay, so that is about changing things. Now, what about the shading mode? And why do we have various shading, and how to use the hotkeys, and etc., etc. So when you see something as a typical object, you see this one. This one's great if you have if you're working on a texture or the model is ready and you don't want to switch up things. But when you want to edit a model, you have to have a better view on the vertices, edges, and all the tiny parts around. And when you're animating, you want to see the distortions, okay? Because right now it's good, but the shading tries to smoothen things out, but you don't know the actual resolution. At least visually, it's harder to recognize. You see there's a break here or something there, a jag here, but it's not that accurate. So from the default shading, I will switch to a facets method. So that's one option to help these. Okay, so now we have the facets. So we don't see the smoothing, and when the model is selected, we will use the F4 to show the wires as well. So let me go back to default shading, and let me explain the two most important hotkeys. So F3, function key 3, is wireframe and shading. So wireframe, it's very good if you have an object inside another object. So for example, you have a figure and you have teeth inside a figure, or eyeballs, and you would select those. Or you have another figure behind the first one and you have a fixed camera, so you can use this F3. If I want to select, for example, in wireframe mode, I can select the teapot behind this one, okay, just because it's not fully shaded. But if I have a fully shaded viewport, I can't select because it's not visible for my pointer. But if I'm pressing F3, now I can search for an area where I can just select in between the wireframe of the green teapot. Okay, so it's technically it's a really valuable tool to switch. For editing, most of the time you will use this F4 on and off. Okay, so shaded mode is good for texturing, good for checking proportions, creates screenshots. But when you are editing, you want to see the wires. You want to see the wires and the shaded model, because it will give you the feedback for the changes what you made in the geometry. Okay, so F3, F4, Alt W for maximizing, and if you maximize something else, now as you see, if I'm just hovering over a different viewport and I'm pressing Alt W, that's the viewport that will be maximized. Okay, so there's so many little tricks that you can use, but even it's just enough to focus on the main things. So rotation, everything happens in the navigation with the middle mouse button. So pressing down is pan, scrolling is zoom, and Alt and press down with the mouse button is rotation. And if you ever get lost, press Z, and that will bring you back everything to the center, at least your selection, if nothing is selected. So Alt W, back. Now I have all the 4 viewports, and if you forget a hotkey regarding to this navigation, there's nothing really bad happens. You will just slow down a bit, so you can still go back to this kind of a view cube, or you can go to the old school tools for viewport navigation. So this one is maximize viewport. It's a toggle, so it's a back and forth button. But here we have an orbit. So orbit is about rotating around. Now orbit still has a function if you want to kind of steering things. You can do that like this. Okay, so if you have to have an odd type of rotation, you can still use orbit, but other than that it's not used anymore. It has a hotkey, it's Control R, that's the hotkey for orbit, but it's really a rare one. So mostly you will use this Alt and with the mouse to rotate things around. We have a zoom with the lens, so now we can zoom if you want to do it without a scroll, or you don't have a scroll. We can have a zoom all. That means all the 4 viewports will be zoomed simultaneously. That's pretty nice. We can have a zoom extends. Zoom extends is the like pressing Z, so that's a zoom extends if you have multiple selections. Okay, I've just left it, so let me turn off this selection mode. Now I have this zoom selected, and zoom extends all selected will do the same zoom but in every viewport. Okay, so it's quite handy, especially if you are using reference images and you want to see your figure from the side and the front. It's really a good option to use. Okay, now let me zoom out, and once you have the selection, you may see, and especially if you see the wires, you may see that when the selection is there, the wires will be shown in a white. Okay, it's quite an important information. White is the color of selection. Why do we care about this? Because when you try to organize your scene, you will see that you can change the colors of your items. So if I have teapot 1 and I want to rename it to Mr. Bead Tea, and I want to change the color, I can change it in the modify panel. Okay, so here's my teapot 3. This was teapot 2, but this one is Mr. B's tea. So why not? I want to change the color as well. So I'm going to the modify panel because I want to change and modify the thing. So this is the area where I want to edit my things or add up some modifiers. And next, beside the name, here's this color selector. I've chose to rename my item here in the Layer Explorer. So Layer Explorer could be found here. And I was choosing to rename it there, but if you have a smaller screen and you don't like to use Layer Explorer all the time, you can just go in here on the modify panel and add a letter or whatever, and it will update there as well. If we want to change the color, we can click on the color selector, and 3ds Max palette is quite restricted. We can add up and choose from AutoCAD ACI palette, and there will be a little bit different shades. This is just for information. It's not really for a final texture. It's not that type of property. It's just a color that helps you to recognize and select your object. If you want to go for the standard and strongest colors and you have only a few items, you can choose from these. But usually yellow is for the whites. This vivid green is for helper objects. Red is usually a highlight of the selected sub-object, so it can be misleading sometimes. This dark blue is pretty good. This purple is also so, but you can choose any of them. Alright, let me switch to a kind of an orange. Here we go, and now I have this in orange. So now we are at the modify panel, and we have the options to rename and adjust the things. What else we can do? So let me zoom out a little bit, rotate it around, and I think it's not the best option for the color. So let me switch to something else. Okay, now it's a little bit more distinctive from the others. So what you have here is called modifier stack. Right now, this modifier stack is practically only have this teapot. And teapot is a basic model. So basic model and parametric models or standard primitives are ready to modify on a very basic level. So for example, we can adjust the radius, we can adjust the number of segments, and we can turn off a couple things like parts visibility, and we have a basic texturing info. Okay, so right now this is all what I have. A couple things. So once you are ready with this and you're satisfied with the adjustments and you want to move things around, for example rotate them or scale or whatever, how to do it. So the way you do it is we have transformation tools. The transformation tools are typically the move and rotate and scale. Okay, all of these are named as select and move, select and rotate, select and scale. The reason is because when you click on you can't select with when the tool is active, but when you have simple select object mode on, simple selection, you're not able to transform them. If you have a pretty delicate area you don't want to mess up, you don't want to accidentally move or rotate, scale the points, typically you're switching with to select object. The hotkey is Q for that. So the hotkey is Q, and now I'm cycling through the select options too if I'm pressing the Q. Okay, it's not just Control F, it's also Q, because this select object is active. So I can select the object, but when I want to move them, I can press W. If I want to rotate them, I can press E. If I want to scale them, I can press R. Alright? In different softwares, they say, hey, why is it W? Why not grab, or why not M as move? Come on, it's the most convenient. It's right at your fingertips. Especially if you're from a game or like the game, it's just, come on, it's quite natural to switch from Q simple selection to W. It's like a day in the morning. So this is the way you switch to various move and rotate, so with the hotkeys or with the icons, or you can right click and still choose move, rotate, scale from here. Okay, but I think the best option is if you are using the simple hotkeys. But once we are opening this up, let me show something. So this is the right click panel. This is called quad panel, but right now it is not a quad. Okay, so right click and move, rotate, and scale. Everything is there. But here's this tiny thing, because it means with a kind of a window option of this function. So what does it mean? If I'm pressing this one, it will open up a transform type in window for the move. So it is a kind of every time you right click and see this icon, it means you have further settings to that particular function. So if I want to rotate and press this one, it will bring me the rotate transform type in dialog. This is about degrees, so I want to rotate around X degree. X degree is not the best, probably Z will be okay. I will explain later on what's going on here. So 10. Now I have a 10-degree rotation. Okay, so that's what's happening. But this transform type in is actually the same thing that we have here. We will go through this just a second. But don't forget, right click, and when you see something here like a kind of a little window indicated that shows we have further settings. So if I say move with a window, you want to open up this. Okay, now, so what about the gizmo, the transform gizmo? We have a couple restrictions on this, and these are really handy. You don't have to press any hotkey for using this. If you are grabbing the y-axis, boom, you're grabbing the y-axis. If you're grabbing the x, boom, you're grabbing only along the x. If you're hovering over between the y and the x and highlighting a kind of a tiny rectangular area, now you're ready to move in a planar surface. So you're moving along x and y. And here you can move along Z and Y, etc., and X and Z. Okay, if you want to move freely, like a freeform move, you can go inside and grab the center dot, and now you're good to go, and you can move whatever the way you want. Alright, same logic applies to rotation. So E is the hotkey for rotation. So we have axis rotations, and actually it is highlighting. It is even showing the degrees up here, can you see? So it's showing the degrees, and it has a visual feedback, so it's a great tool. So you can rotate around the x-axis, undo y-axis, and this kind of a straight line here, so along the z-axis. Okay, so it's a rotation. If you are selecting this outer ring, it will rotate your object aligned to the camera. Okay, so the rotation will be always in the plane of the camera. So the rotational plane will be perpendicular with the camera plane. Okay, let me do this. By default, we have 20 undos. So if and computer saves every 5 minutes. So 20 undos are fairly good, especially if you have a larger scene. 20 is enough usually, because it can increase save time and workload on a computer. But if you have a small screen and you want to undo a little bit more, you can adjust that as well. Customize preferences, and we have files, and within files we have this number of autoback files, and also this is the save time. Okay, and here's the scene undo. Levels is 20. So if you want to add more, you can level this up. If you want to save more frequently, like backup interval, you can set it to 2. But if you have a 1 GB scene, it will be really slow to save it every 3 minutes. Okay, so be careful. Number of auto backup files are set to 3. That means in the first 5 minutes, it will use the first backup file. In the second 5 minutes, so at 10 minutes, it will save the second one. In the third, in a quarter, it will save the third one. And then it starts over, so it will just overwrite your files. If you get lost, or if you get a crash message, you will find these autoback files within your documents folder. So your own user documents, and there is an Autodesk, and there is an auto backup folder, and you will find your folders there. But sometimes even the file and open resend is there. Okay, so about rotation, that was about rotation. If you want to accurately rotate, I mean with 5 degrees, for example, so instead of just rotating around, you want to be pretty much articulated about your rotation. You can use letter A, like alien, as an angle snap toggle hotkey. So this is angle snap, and when angle snap is turned on, you can rotate around with 5 degree incrementals. Okay, so that's really good. Now it's visible. Okay, so it's fairly good. You can use this, and once you're done and you don't want to use it anymore because it's a toggle, you can turn it on and off. So A again, and now I'm good to go, and rotate it as it is. Alright, so let's switch to scale. Now scale is working. It's quite similar to the move. So we have the 3 axes. It is great, and also there is a kind of a squeeze and squash kind of a scaling, so you can use that, but be careful. 90% of the times you want to choose and use uniform scales. Uniform scales only happening if you are in dead center of this gizmo, and that shows that everything is scanning up and down. Now, hold your horses and just lay back for a second. Let me show you something, and I will explain later on why is it important. But when I'm scaling up and down the object is selected. The radius is not changing. Okay? So be careful. And this is just simply scaling the object, but the radius is not changing. From an animation standpoint, it will be important when you're importing models, when you're exporting, or try to rigging something. It will become an issue if you're just scanning up and down things without resetting them. Okay, but I will explain it later on. So that is about scaling. And let me switch back to move and show you one of the most important, most frequently used transformation features is the copy of the item. So here we are, we have this element and I want to copy it, and I don't want to create, there is something called, there's Ctrl C and Ctrl V usually, and most people will remember this, that if you press Ctrl C it might copy the element, but no, Ctrl C does a very different thing in 3ds Max. It will create a camera for you. Okay, now how do you know? If you start moving around things and things are just not moving as well. Okay, so you cannot rotate, for example. I'm holding down the Alt key and the middle mouse button and it's not rotating. Why? Because I'm in a camera viewport now. How do I know? First of all, yes, I recognize that I'm limited in my move, but here the display says, okay, I'm in a physical camera. Alright, so when you press Ctrl C, this is what happens. Your perspective viewport will be converted into a camera viewport. This is quite handy, quite frequently used, but for beginners, if you don't know this, it might be kind of a surprise. So that's it. How to leave the camera mode, you just press P, and now you're good to go. You're free to move, and here we go. This is the camera. But if you purposely created a camera, you can always press C, and that will land you back in a camera viewport. Alright, so T for top, P for perspective, L for left, B is bottom. Right is not there, but right could be addressed through another hotkey. So once we have the camera viewport is already known, let me select and delete the camera. So just clicked on the camera. It will delete the target, so it's not just the one item. We have a camera and the target, and I'll press the delete. Okay, and for the viewports, some people like to use this pop-up window. So if you press simple V, like Vendetta, you can bring up the viewports palette, and now you have front, back, top view, left and right, and back view even. So the most frequently used combination with transformation is the shift copy. So this is how it works. You press down the shift key and drag it out, and when you release the shift, so let me repeat it again. So I'm holding down shift key, selecting in a specific axis that I'm looking for, and dragging, holding down both the shift and the left mouse button, and when I'm releasing both, it will bring up this clone option. And right now it has a built-in option to automatically rename the element, so let me rename it to plus, and this will be a copy type of model, so that means there's no connection between the two. This will be a copy, it's a free, it has its own vil, so there's no any kind of connection. If I'm choosing instance, it will be like an absolute mirror type clone. So what's the difference and how do I recognize this? So here's the model and the name is written in bold. And also I have this icon turned on, so when you're selecting the original teapot, for example, here there's no bold and there's no make unique option. So this means when I'm selecting this, any of these, I can adjust the radius, for example, turn off or lower the number of segments, and change the handle. Now, especially when you have multiple elements copied like this, so let me show this. So you can drag it out and shift and drag and choose instance, and here we have an option to increase the number of copies. So if I'm creating a Greek temple or whatever, it's maybe these are columns, so I'm setting the copies to 10, and this will create 10 teapots in a row. That's good, and all of them are identical. So if I'm changing up a parameter here and there, these will update. Now the thing I do here is called spin and drag. Spin and drag works this way. So you have these two tiny triangles, that's the spinner. I'm holding the left mouse button, and instead of just clicking in, I'm holding and moving the mouse. This is spin and drag. If I want to reset this to set to 0, I can do that. It's pretty much pointless here, but let me do this. Right click on the spinner will 0 out the value. Let me increase it back, and here we go. This is it. The reason I'm talking about spin and drag here is the following. So we can use spin and drag almost every values at every location, but there's a danger here. So the number of segments is set to 4. It's a low value. But if you change it up, and you change it on hundreds of instances, this is what happens. So you can use the spin and drag here, but it can crash the computer. So just step one, I'm just pressing once. I'm not holding, not using the spin and drag because it's dangerous. It can slow down the things. If you have hundreds, it will be definitely a demon on the graphics card. So don't spin and drag, otherwise you will end up like you have segments of 30, and it means a couple million of polygons. Okay, right. So that is about copying with the shift, but this one is working perfectly with rotation and scale as well. So if I'm switching back to rotation mode, and I'm holding down the shift key and drag, now I have this copy and in place copy of this model, which was good. I can move it away if I want to move it another place, and here we go. Alright, so the same works with the scale, so you can scale with another scaling option, and here we go. This is the model that we created. If you don't want to move, scale, or modify the object, you just need a very same object at the same location. This is where you are using the simple clone option, Control and simple V, Control Vendetta. Okay, so Control V, and you can choose it's a copy or it's an instance, it's a reference. But when you're using this type of command, my strong recommendation is rename it. So Mr. Bean's T, and instead of X it will be other. Okay, so this is the other one. Why? Because it's hard to select when you have overlapping objects. It's hard to select and hard to judge which one is selected. So you have to see the name, okay? Especially if the colors and textures are similar. Why do we do this? Sometimes just for a possible crash to save out of work, or because we have a workflow and we reached a milestone and we want to save the current state of our model for demonstrating purposes, or for technical work, or as a reference. It doesn't matter, but sometimes you want to save it as it is at the same location with the same properties. Okay, so this is Mr. Bean's the other. If I want, I can select by the name. Another way, if you don't like to use this because you don't have the space and you're kind of an old school, you choose and use the H command. H will bring you this select from scene option, and here you can scroll down and select the name. Alright, so if you don't see any content, it doesn't mean there's none. You can open up with this tiny triangle. Usually these triangles are for showing and hiding what's under the list. So I can select from here. Alright, so if you don't see it, it's not visible or closed, you can still use H and select by name. The other odd thing, I don't know what's the reason behind this, but we have two buttons, one for Scene Explorer and one for Layer Explorer. The reason is I don't understand, because you can switch it here. So no matter what you are opening up, so if you have Scene Explorer, right now I have kind of two things here. It's really unnecessary, but you can switch here. So now it's sort by hierarchy, and this was sort by layer. Alright, so Hierarchy is when you have linked elements, it will become a player, but mostly you like to use them, like to work on different layers, and not. And linking relation is mostly used for problem solving or rigging. Okay, anyway, you just keep in mind that you can always go back to the layer mode. Let me drag and close it, and let me resize the window. So here we go. And I don't need the other teapot, so it is selected. And I can press delete. Alright, when you have, these are also not needed. So when you have an object, you can change the properties here on the modify panel. You can change the name here easily, or in the Scene Explorer. We are using the middle mouse button, scrolling, and the middle mouse button for panning, and alt middle mouse button for rotating. Z and zoom is for fixing and zooming in to the particular selection. Alt W is for maximizing the viewport. When you are in a maximized viewport or anytime, you can always use the P and T and B and P hotkeys. If you want to show or hide the wires on top of the viewports, you can use that one, as well as F4. If you want to purely see the wireframe, you can choose and press F3. It's a toggle, so you can back up, show the shaded mode as well. Q is switching for selection. If you press again Q, it will cycle through the selection type like a region. Okay, it's a little bit odd, but one hotkey can actually do multiple things. Once it is engaged, it will you will have access to other things as well. So it happens a couple times. The same thing happening at the scale, and this could be a little bit tricky because W is for move, E is for rotation, but can you see this tiny triangle? So we have, that means when you're pressing it down, there are multiple versions of it, and when you're pressing R multiple times, it will cycle through the options. The first option, this is what we use the most, it's the uniform scale. Shift, whenever you transform an object with move or scale or rotate, and you're using the shift key, it will just drag. You can just drag and make a copy, an instance, or a reference. We used only copy and instance. Instance means it is the same. We will use reference as well in the next lessons, but right now that's our main goal. Okay, so this is the modify. If you want to go back and create anything, you can go and do it from the create panel. We have the geometry types, standard primitives, and these are the basic objects to deal with. Another thing to know that if you are in the perspective mode, you will also restrict it by default to create your elements on the floor. Okay, so perspective means the floor grid is active. We will go through settings in the next lesson. I will explain why those settings are so crucial for us. But right now, that is about the basic handling, selection, copying, and other things. Okay, thank you very much, and goodbye.